Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. There's a black and white photograph from Germany in 1936 that speaks volumes without saying a word. Picture this, a massive shipyard in Hamburg. Hundreds of workers packed together like sardines, every single right arm shooting forward in that infamous Nazi salute. It's almost hypnotic, really. This sea of people moving as one, all hailing their Führer in perfect, chilling unison. But here's where it gets interesting. If you look really closely, squint a little and lean in, you'll spot him, one man who breaks the pattern. Right there in the thick of the crowd, surrounded by all those rigid, outstretched arms, stands a guy doing absolutely nothing. Well, not nothing exactly. His arms are folded firmly across his chest. His expression? Calm, but defiant. He's the lone soul in that entire crowd refusing to salute. The only one swimming against the current. Looking back through the lens of history, we know something profound. He was the only person in that entire photograph who got it right. While his entire nation fell under a spell, he somehow managed to see through the fog. His name was probably August Landmesser. Just an ordinary working guy who happened to fall in love with a Jewish woman. And that simple, beautiful act of love, it cracked open his eyes. It helped him see past all the propaganda that everyone around him had swallowed whole. We all like to imagine we'd be him, right? We tell ourselves that if we'd been there, we would have had the guts to fold our arms while everyone else fell in line. But would we really? What does it actually take to see the invisible forces shaping our world? What kind of courage does it require to stand up when literally everyone else is going along with something deeply wrong? That question sits at the beating heart of one of the most eye-opening books in recent memory, Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents. Isabel Wilkerson, the author, is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who's dedicated her life to uncovering the hidden stories that define who we are. With this book, she's done something remarkable. She's handed us a completely new way of seeing the invisible framework holding our society together. Today I'm going to walk you through the profound insights packed into this book. And here's my promise to you. By the time we're done, you won't just understand the divisions you see playing out around you every day. You'll understand the hidden operating system creating them. You'll see the invisible script we've all been handed since birth, and you'll discover the power we have to write a new one. This isn't just a book summary. It's like getting a new pair of glasses that suddenly brings the whole world into focus. Let's dive in. Have you ever had the experience of living in a really old house? You know what I'm talking about. It's got great bones, solid structure, maybe even some beautiful features. But over time, things start going sideways. There are cracks, spiderwebbing across the foundation that someone's tried to patch up but never really fixed. There's this weird sag in the ceiling that everyone pretends not to notice. After every storm, that basement gets damp, and you just kind of live with it. Here's the thing. You didn't build this house. Your parents probably didn't either. But you're living in it now. And somewhere deep down you know that ignoring these problems won't make them disappear. Those cracks? They're going to spread. The foundation? It's going to weaken. And any further damage from here on out, well, that's on you. Isabel Wilkerson opens her monumental book, Caste, with exactly this powerful metaphor. America is that old house. For centuries, we've been living with a hidden structural problem affecting every single one of us. We just haven't had the right language for it. We talk about race all the time. We talk about class. We argue about politics. But, according to Wilkerson, all of that is just surface-level stuff. The sagging ceilings and cracked plaster. The real problem, the faulty foundation everything else is built on top of, runs much older and much deeper. She calls it caste. Now, when you hear caste, India probably pops into your head. Makes sense. India has the world's most recognized and ancient caste system. But here's where Wilkerson makes a breathtaking argument. The United States has a caste system too. It's hidden, it's unspoken, but it's incredibly powerful. So what exactly is a caste system? Imagine a play that's been running for centuries. The moment you're born, someone hands you a costume and a script. You're cast in a specific role. Some people get cast as the leads, the heroes everyone's rooting for. They get the best lines, the spotlight, and everyone on stage just knows they're in charge. Others land supporting roles. And some people, they're cast as the background chorus, essential for the show to go on, but nameless and faceless, with no lines to speak. Here's the kicker. You can never take the costume off. It signals to everyone else in the play exactly what role you're supposed to play and where you belong on that stage. Stick to the script and you get rewarded. Try to improvise, and the other actors will quickly remind you to get back in your lane. A caste system, Wilkerson explains, works just like that. It's an artificial, fixed ranking of human value. One group gets placed at the top as the standard of what it means to be human, and everyone else gets ranked beneath them. And in America, the main signal of your rank, your costume in this play, is what we call race. Here's how she puts it. Race is the skin. Caste is the bones. Race is what we can see, physical traits that have been assigned arbitrary meanings over centuries. But caste? That's the invisible infrastructure underneath everything, the subconscious code telling us how to interact with each other. It's like grammar we somehow learned without ever taking a class. We just know it, we feel it. This realization hit Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. like a lightning bolt back in 1959. He and his wife Coretta were visiting India, the homeland of his hero Gandhi. By this point, King was a global figure, a Nobel Prize nominee who'd broken bread with prime ministers. During their trip, he visited a school for children from India's lowest caste, the people once called untouchables. The principal introduced him to the students with words King never forgot. "Young people, I would like to present to you a fellow untouchable from the United States of America." King was stunned, shocked really, even a bit annoyed. Him? An untouchable? But then he paused. He thought about the 20 million black people in America, trapped in poverty, exiled in their own country. And in that moment of reflection, something clicked. Yes, he thought to himself, I am an untouchable, and every Negro in the United States of America is an untouchable. He realized that the so-called land of the free had built its own caste system, and he'd been living inside it his whole life. This was the invisible enemy he'd been fighting all along. So how did this broken foundation get laid? Where did these cracks begin? Wilkerson takes us back to late August 1619, a full year before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. A ship arrived in colonial Virginia carrying, as settler John Rolfe wrote, not anything but 20 and odd Negroes. At first, the lines weren't crystal clear. Status was based more on religion, Christian versus heathen, than skin color. European indentured servants worked right alongside enslaved Africans. Everyone was struggling. But over the next few decades, the colonists, desperate for a permanent and easily identifiable labor force, started sharpening those lines. They made a series of deliberate decisions that would alter the course of history. They decided that Christianity would no longer protect an African person from lifetime enslavement. In 1662, they passed a law that broke with all English tradition. A child would now inherit the status of their mother, not their father. This single piece of legislation meant that a slave owner could father children with an enslaved woman, and those children would be born into slavery, literally adding to his wealth. It turned the black womb into a profit center. Slowly and deliberately, the colonists fused all the different people from Europe, English, Irish, German, into a brand new invention, the white race. And they defined it primarily by what it wasn't: black. This created the two-tiered caste system that would define America for the next 400 years. A dominant caste at the top, and a subordinate caste at the very bottom, serving as the foundation, the mudsill, upon which the entire house was built. And what was it actually like to live on that mudsill? Wilkerson doesn't pull any punches here. She argues that we do our country a huge disservice when we dismiss slavery as just some sad, dark chapter in our past. For 246 years, longer than the United States has existed as a free nation, slavery was the country. It was an American innovation, an extreme form of human bondage that had existed nowhere else in the world quite like this. For the first time in history, one group of people was ruled completely out of the human race and transformed into property, into currency. They could be bred like livestock, mortgaged, whipped, raped, branded, sold away from their children, or tortured for an owner's entertainment. They were denied the right to marry, to learn to read, or even to cry when their families were ripped apart at auction blocks. It was a living death, passed down for 12 generations. It took a civil war, the deadliest conflict in our history, to end the institution of slavery. But here's the crucial part: it didn't end the caste system. The structure remained standing. After a brief period of hope called Reconstruction, the dominant caste reasserted its power with a vengeance. They devised a labyrinth of new laws, the Jim Crow system, designed to keep newly freed people locked at the bottom. Into this existing hierarchy, each new wave of immigrants arrived. People from Ireland, Italy, Poland, Russia. They came to America to escape their own hardships. But to be accepted, to become truly American, they had to learn how to become white, and becoming white meant distancing themselves from the people at the bottom. It meant learning the slurs, joining in the scorn, proving they belonged in the dominant caste by showing they knew who was beneath them. This, Wilkerson says, is the tragic play we've all been born into. We're the latest cast in a long-running drama. None of us chose our roles, but we're living with them every single day. So how does a caste system, this invisible force, maintain its power for so long? Wilkerson identifies what she calls the 8 pillars of caste, the foundational beliefs holding the entire structure up. And here's what's truly chilling. These exact same pillars appear in India's caste system, in Nazi Germany, and in the United States. It's like they were all working from the same twisted instruction manual. Let's walk through them, because this is where the hidden architecture becomes crystal clear. Pillar number 1 is divine will and the laws of nature. Every caste system claims the hierarchy isn't man-made. It's supposedly the will of God, or just the natural order of things. In India, the ancient laws of Manu say the different castes were literally created from different parts of the god Brahma's body. Brahmin priests from his mouth, warriors from his arms, merchants from his thighs, and laborers from his feet. Below everyone were the untouchables, considered outside the system entirely. In America, the colonists turned to the Bible, specifically the story of Noah and his sons. They twisted the curse of Ham into divine justification for enslaving people from Africa. They convinced themselves that God had ordained this hierarchy. Thomas Cobb, a defender of slavery, wrote that God had framed black people physically and mentally to fill the sphere in which they were thrown. When a system is seen as divinely ordered, challenging it feels like challenging God himself. The The second pillar is heritability. Your rank gets stamped on you at birth. You're born into your caste, and you stay there for life. Your children inherit your caste, and their children after them. It has nothing to do with your talent, your character, or how hard you work. It's purely about the bloodline you were born into. This is the key difference between caste and class. Class can change. You can, through education or luck or hustle, move from a lower class to a higher one. But as Wilkerson puts it, if you can act your way out of it, then it is class, not caste. In America, even at the absolute highest levels of achievement, caste follows you like a shadow. She tells the story of Oscar-winning actor Forrest Whitaker, a distinguished wealthy man, walking into a fancy gourmet deli in New York City. As he turned to leave without buying anything, an employee stopped him, accused him of shoplifting, and publicly frisked him in front of other customers. His fame and wealth couldn't shield him from the assumptions of his caste. As LeBron James once said, "If you are an African American man or African American woman, you will always be that." This leads us to the third pillar, endogamy, or the control of marriage and mating. This is the firewall of any caste system. To keep bloodlines pure, you have to forbid marriage and intimacy across caste lines. For most of American history, this was brutally enforced. As early as 1691, Virginia outlawed marriage between blacks and whites. Eventually, 41 of the 50 states would make interracial marriage a crime. This wasn't about personal preference. It was about power. By controlling who could legally create a family together, the dominant caste blocked the possibility for empathy. It made it far easier to see those in the lower caste as other, as fundamentally not your kind. The punishment for crossing this line was often death. Wilkerson tells the heartbreaking story of Willie James Howard, a 15-year-old boy in Florida in 1944. He had a crush on a white girl he worked with at a dime store and sent her a sweet, innocent Christmas card. He even included a little poem, "I love your name, I love your voice, for a sweet, sweetheart, you are my choice." The girl showed the card to her father. The next day, her father and 2 other men dragged Willie James from his home, took him to the Suwannee River, tied him up, and forced his father to watch as they made him jump to his death. His only crime was stepping outside the boundaries of caste. Pillar number 4 is purity versus pollution. This is the obsession with keeping the dominant caste pure and avoiding contamination from lower castes. This pillar creates a world of bizarre and cruel rules. In some parts of India, a Dalit had to stay a certain number of paces away from a Brahmin because even his shadow might pollute the high caste person. In Nazi Germany, Jews were banned from public swimming pools because it was believed their bodies would contaminate the water. In the United States, this obsession was everywhere. There were separate Bibles in Southern courtrooms, one for blacks and one for whites, so hands of different castes wouldn't touch the same sacred object. Black people couldn't try on clothes in stores. In Florida, even the textbooks for black and white children couldn't be stored together in the same warehouse. Nowhere was this obsession clearer than with swimming pools. Wilkerson shares the story of Al Bright, the only black player on his Little League championship team in Ohio in 1951. The team went to a public pool to celebrate their victory, but Al wasn't allowed in. After much debate, the lifeguards came up with a solution. First, every white person had to get out of the water. Then they put Al in a small rubber raft. A lifeguard got in the water and pushed the raft for a single, agonizing lap around the pool, while his teammates watched from the sidelines. The whole time, the lifeguard kept repeating one warning: "Just don't touch the water. Whatever you do, "Don't touch the water." His body could not be allowed to pollute the water his teammates had just been swimming in. The fifth pillar is occupational hierarchy. This is the idea that society needs a mudsill, a group destined to do the menial, undesirable jobs so others don't have to. Senator James Henry Hammond of South Carolina declared this openly on the Senate floor in 1858. In all social systems, he said, there must be a class to do the menial duties. It constitutes the very mudsill of society. For most of American history, African Americans were relegated to these jobs by law and custom: sharecroppers, servants, janitors. In the 1890s, 85% of black men worked in either agriculture or domestic service. Any sign of ambition above one's station was seen as a threat. "Anything that causes the Negro to aspire above the plow handle," said a Mississippi governor, "will be the worst thing on earth for the Negro. God Almighty designed him for a menial." This brings us to the sixth pillar, dehumanization and stigma. To keep a caste system running, you have to convince yourself that the people at the bottom aren't fully human. It's a programming, Wilkerson says, a war against what your own eyes can see and what your heart could feel. She draws stark parallels between the dehumanization of Jews in Nazi labor camps and enslaved people in the American South. Both were stripped of their names and given numbers or mocking nicknames. Both had their heads shaved. Both were fed barely enough to survive while being forced into brutal labor. Both were subjected to gruesome medical experiments without consent or anesthesia, from the Nazi doctors at Auschwitz to Dr. J. Marion Sims, the so-called father of gynecology, who perfected his techniques by performing agonizing surgeries on enslaved women without any pain relief. Dehumanization makes atrocities seem reasonable, even normal. In the early 20th century, a popular carnival game was the coon dip, where white fairgoers paid money to throw baseballs at the head of a live black man. This wasn't seen as monstrous. It was considered entertainment. The seventh pillar is terror as enforcement. You simply cannot keep an entire group of people in an artificial, subordinate position without violence. Terror isn't a bug in a caste system. It's a feature. It's a necessary tool for control. The whip was the most common instrument of punishment during slavery, but after slavery ended, the terror took on new forms. For decades, a black person was lynched every 3 or 4 days in America. These weren't secret murders happening in the shadows. They were public spectacles, part carnival and part torture chamber. Thousands of people, including children, would gather to watch. Photographers would set up and sell postcards of the killings, which people would mail to their relatives. One person wrote on the back of a postcard from a lynching in Waco, Texas, "This is the barbecue we had last night. Your son Joe." As Time magazine would later observe, even the Nazis did not stoop to selling souvenirs of Auschwitz. This pillar is about constantly reminding the subordinate caste of the absolute power the dominant caste holds over them. As a white man in Mississippi told an anthropologist in the 1930s, when asked why black people were so polite, "They have to be." Finally, the eighth pillar is inherent superiority versus inherent inferiority. This is the daily, moment-to-moment reinforcement of the idea that one group is naturally smarter, better, and more deserving than the other. It shows up in unspoken rules of etiquette: who has to step off the sidewalk, who gets called Mr., who has to enter through the back door. It's about controlling the symbols of status. For centuries, there were laws specifying the kinds of cheap, rough fabrics enslaved people were allowed to wear. They couldn't wear anything that might be seen as above their station. Even in the 1940s, Black soldiers returning from World War II were attacked and killed for wearing their army uniforms, a symbol of status and citizenship the caste system simply could not tolerate. One of the most powerful examples Wilkerson shares comes from a 1944 high school essay contest in Columbus, Ohio. The topic was, "What to do with Hitler after the war?" A 16-year-old African-American girl won the contest with a single devastating sentence: "Put him in a black skin and let him live the rest of his life in America." These 8 pillars, working together, create a powerful, self-reinforcing system. But what are the real consequences of living inside this old, damaged house? Wilkerson shows how the tentacles of caste reach into every aspect of our lives, creating psychological burdens for everyone, not just those at the bottom. For people in the dominant caste, especially those on the lower economic rungs, there's a constant, gnawing anxiety. Social scientists call it dominant group status threat. For generations, working-class white Americans were given what W.E.B. Du Bois called a, quote, public and psychological wage. They might not have had wealth or power, but they had their whiteness. No matter how tough things got, they knew they'd never be at the very bottom. But in recent decades, as society has slowly become more equal and demographics have shifted, that old guarantee has started feeling less certain. For some people, Wilkerson suggests, equality feels like a demotion. The rise of others feels like a threat to their own identity. This has led to what economists Anne Case and Angus Deaton call deaths of despair, a shocking rise in suicide, drug overdoses, and alcoholism among middle-aged white Americans. They are, in a way, dying from the end of an illusion. For those in the subordinate caste, the pressure creates what she calls last-place anxiety. The system pits people against each other in what amounts to a flooding basement. People start ranking themselves by their proximity to the dominant caste, lighter skin, straighter hair. Immigrants quickly learn that one fast path to acceptance is distancing themselves from the people at the very bottom. It creates the crabs-in-a-barrel phenomenon, where people pull each other down out of fear or envy, unwittingly doing the caste system's work for it. And for everyone, the friction of caste is literally killing us. Wilkerson dives into the medical science here. When we're exposed to chronic stress, the daily cuts of discrimination, the constant need to stay vigilant, our bodies release the stress hormone cortisol. Over time, this weathers our bodies. It shortens our telomeres, the protective caps on our chromosomes, which is literally a measure of premature aging. Here's what's really wild. This isn't just a problem for people at the bottom. Scientists have found that harboring prejudice itself can be deadly. When people with high levels of unconscious bias interact with people from other groups, their own bodies perceive a threat. Their blood pressure rises, cortisol floods their system, their own prejudice is literally making them sick. A caste system is a disease, and none of us is immune. The turning point in Wilkerson's modern narrative is the election of Barack Obama in 2008. It was the greatest departure from the script of the American caste system in history. But this dramatic change in the script didn't heal the country's divisions. It exposed them like never before. It triggered a massive backlash. That sense of dominant group status threat went into absolute overdrive. The number of hate groups surged across the country. A whole movement arose whose sole purpose was to prove that the first black president wasn't even a citizen. As Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell bluntly declared, the Republican Party's single most important goal was to make Obama a one-term president. This backlash, this resurgence of caste consciousness, culminated in the election of 2016. Wilkerson argues that so many observers were completely blindsided because they failed to see the powerful, predictable force of caste at work. Many working-class white voters, she suggests, weren't voting against their economic interests. They were voting to protect what they saw as their most valuable interests, their position in the hierarchy. The symbols of this struggle are all around us. Wilkerson takes us to Charlottesville, where a rally to protect a statue of Robert E. Lee turned deadly. America, she points out, has more than 1,700 monuments to the Confederacy, a republic that literally went to war against the United States to preserve slavery. We honor the losers of that war, the leaders of a treasonous cause. She contrasts this sharply with Germany. After World War II, Germany went through a painful but necessary process of reckoning with its past. Today, it's actually a crime to display a swastika in Germany. There are no statues celebrating Nazi generals in town squares. Instead, their memorials are for the victims. Hitler's bunker, where he spent his final days, is now an unremarkable parking lot. Germany chose to confront its history head-on, to learn from it, and to build memorials that say never again. America, she suggests, has yet to truly reckon with its past, and we're paying a steep price for it. Compared to other wealthy nations, the United States lags behind in almost every measure of well-being. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world. Our maternal mortality rate is the worst in the developed world. Our life expectancy is lower. Our students score near the bottom in math and reading among developed nations. We rank 18th in happiness. A caste system, with its built-in rivalry and lack of empathy, prevents us from creating a society where everyone can genuinely thrive. The COVID-19 pandemic, she writes, was like an X-ray machine, exposing all the pre-existing conditions of our caste system, the inequalities that determined who could work safely from home and who had to risk their lives on the front lines, who got the best medical care, and who died at disproportionate rates. It's a pretty bleak picture. The old house is in rough shape, the foundation is badly cracked, so is there any hope? This is where Wilkerson's work shifts from diagnosis to prescription. The final section of her book is called Awakening, and it begins with a powerful story of personal transformation. It's the story of a Brahmin in India, a man born into the very highest caste. He was twice born, initiated into manhood with a sacred thread draped across his chest, a symbol of his purity and superiority. But over the course of his life, he began to see the lie of caste. He witnessed the suffering of the Dalits, the lowest caste, and he recognized their full humanity. He came to see that the system had not only oppressed them, but had also imprisoned him in what he called a fake crown. One day he told a Dalit friend something remarkable. "I have ripped off my sacred thread. It was a poisonous snake around my neck." He had shed the symbol of his unearned privilege. He had chosen his own humanity over his rank. He had awakened. This, Wilkerson suggests, is the path forward for all of us, not through a single law or one election, but through a million individual moments of awakening. She calls for something she terms radical empathy. It's not just sympathy, which is feeling sorry for someone from a distance. It's not pity, which is looking down on someone. It's not even just putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Radical empathy, she writes, is putting in the real work to understand another person's experience from their perspective. It's listening with a humble heart. It's recognizing that the price of privilege is the moral duty to act when you see another person treated unfairly. It's seeing the person in front of you not as a role in a play, not as a costume or a category, but as a complex, breathing human being, just like you. Every single time a person reaches across caste lines and makes a real connection, it helps break the back of the system. Wilkerson reminds us of Albert Einstein. When he fled Nazi Germany and came to America, he was shocked to find another caste system waiting for him here. But he refused to play his assigned role. He refused to look down on African Americans to gain acceptance. When the great singer Marian Anderson was denied a hotel room in Princeton because of her race, Einstein invited her to stay in his home. He joined the NAACP. He spoke out publicly against lynching. He used his immense privilege and fame to stand with those at the bottom. He chose empathy. In the end, Wilkerson leaves us with a profound and simple truth. We didn't create this old house. We're not personally responsible for what people who look like us did centuries ago. But we are absolutely responsible for what we do today. We're responsible for our own ignorance, or our own wisdom. We're responsible for either patching over the cracks and pretending they're not there, or rolling up our sleeves and getting to work on fixing the foundation. A world without caste, she writes, would set everyone free. It would be a world where we look at the breathtaking diversity of our species not as a hierarchy to be climbed, but with genuine wonder and gratitude. It would be a world where we're finally free to be ourselves, not the roles we were cast to play before we were even born. As we close the pages on this summary of caste, I want to sit with you for a moment and reflect on what all of this really means. This isn't just some academic book gathering dust on a shelf. It's a mirror, and looking into it can be genuinely uncomfortable. It forces us to see the invisible structures we walk through every single day. The unspoken rules shaping our interactions, our opportunities, and even our own thoughts about ourselves. The most powerful lesson I take from Isabel Wilkerson's work is this: a caste system is a prison for everyone. It's easy to see how it harms people at the bottom, the ones bearing the daily weight of stigma and exclusion. But Wilkerson masterfully shows us how it also traps people at the top. It burdens them with a false sense of superiority, a brittle identity that depends on having someone beneath them. It narrows their vision, limits their capacity for real empathy, and ultimately robs them of a fuller, richer connection to their own humanity. Nobody actually wins here. The whole house suffers. So what do we do? It's easy to feel overwhelmed by a system that's 400 years old. But Wilkerson doesn't leave us drowning in despair. She offers us a path forward, rooted not in grand political gestures, but in small, personal acts of awakening. If there's one thing you take away from our conversation today, let it be this: you have the power to step out of the role you've been cast in. Here are a few simple ways to start, right now, today. First, just start to see, really see the invisible. The next time you're watching a movie, notice who gets to be the hero. Next time you're in a meeting, pay attention to who gets interrupted and whose ideas get ignored or credited to someone else. The next time you read a news story about crime or poverty, ask yourself what story isn't being told, what context is missing. Wilkerson has given us the language, those 8 pillars, to identify the architecture of caste. Once you truly see it, you can't unsee it. Second, practice that idea of radical empathy. It's way more than just being nice. It's actually a discipline, a practice. It means choosing curiosity over judgment. It means when someone shares an experience of being slighted or disrespected, your first impulse isn't to question whether it really happened or explain it away. Your first response is simply to listen, to say, "Tell me more, I really want to understand." This simple act, repeated over time, can actually begin to repair the cracks in our foundation. And finally, in your own small but meaningful way, break the script. If you're someone who's benefited from being in a dominant caste, use that privilege to create space for others. When you see someone being demeaned or dismissed, Don't be a silent bystander. Your voice carries weight. Use it. If you're someone from a subordinated caste, find the courage to resist the box others have built for you. Your ambition, your success, your joy, these aren't just personal victories. They're acts of rebellion against that old, tired script. We're all heirs to this old, creaky house. The foundation is flawed, the walls are bowed, and honestly, a storm is coming. We can't pretend the damage isn't there anymore. But here's the good news. We can choose to be the generation that finally starts the real repairs. We can choose to build a world where our worth isn't determined by the costume we're handed at birth, but by the content of our character and the compassion in our hearts. A world where everyone is finally, truly free. That was a summary of Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. We've touched on the major themes and stories today, but I've got to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a photograph of the Grand Canyon. It can show you the colors and give you a sense of the scale, but it can never capture the actual feeling of standing on that edge, with the wind in your hair and the sheer vastness of it all taking your breath away. The real magic of this book happens when you read it yourself. It's in those quiet moments when a particular story, or even just a simple phrase, connects with your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is here to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has sparked something in you, I really encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning facts. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and the world around you. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please take a moment to subscribe and maybe share it with someone you think might appreciate it. We're building a community here of people who believe in the power of great ideas to change our lives, and I'd be honored to have you along for the journey as we explore another life-changing book together. Let's keep growing.